Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? November 28th, 2017. It's a Tuesday. It's today. We're broadcasting. What else do you need to know? Okay, let's catch up with a few things. Is my microphone sounding a little hot? Well, we'll wait for Justice to tell me whether that's the case or not. So far, so good, though. And guess what, by the way? Although Greg won't be with us today, I think I fixed the Skype issue. It was an issue of me not having enough patience to find where they had moved the buttons and how they had redefined things and just spending some time parsing through it. I think I got it. So next time he's on, I think he'll be able to hear when the breaks come up, as will any other guests. Of course, we are expecting him back tomorrow along with Joan McCarter. And so we'll be able to prompt them when we're about to take the breaks. And it won't be a total surprise every single time. Plus, of course, that music helps give cues to not only when we're beginning our run-up to the break, but we can tell basically by how the music is going when we're running out of time. Anyway, so much for the housekeeping today. We had some more work going on at the Kagro in the Morning World headquarters, but it did happen outside of broadcast time, so that's good news. Things slowly progressing towards being done. But of course, like I said, we're in the stage of the contracting game where it's now a matter of, okay, well, this spot needs work and that spot needs work, and essentially you got to come back several days in a row and tinker with a few things, just as is always true with everything else. Let's see. Let's see. Justice, speaking of justice, I didn't say justice. I was saying just as is always true. But let's see. He says, well, it's a little hot, but it cooled off a little. I backed off of the microphone a bit. And that's all it really takes to get these things right. Anyway, Daily Coast Radio is live now, as we are reminded all the way from Portland, Maine, thanks to Bill, who is up there. That's why he calls himself what he does. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Don't tell Kagro X, that's me. Don't tell me this. But James O'Keefe is hiding behind his ficus plant with a microphone. I do have a ficus plant, and it is down in the basement. I'm no longer down there. So, once again, he finds himself one step behind. And, not really terribly surprising. James O'Keefe, yes, in the news. I have to get this, I guess, off my chest and into circulation. And I call on the rest of you to help circulate this on Twitter. We need to reassess exactly what James O'Keefe is. I mean, we all know how low down and dirty he is. But I want to bring back one of his previous ridiculous self-owns, and there are a lot of them, and a ton of them out there, and they've been compiled, I think, adequately by many writers, one of whom I was responding to last night, and we can go and take a quick look and see, let's see, what that compilation said. But I want to sort of focus on one of his previous cell phones in particular, and that is one which really I don't think even I categorized or understood correctly until now. And that is the one in which he attempted to set up a CNN reporter, and it was such a bizarre story at the time. It was just difficult to get your head around it. I think I'm thinking, by the way, the writer who best compiled the various self-owns of James O'Keefe is Will Sommer of The Hill. And he's the campaign editor over at The Hill, according to his Twitter bio. And he says he writes a newsletter about conservative media, what is this? Right Richter? Is that what that's supposed to be? Right, Richter. I don't know what the hell that means. But it looks kind of interesting, and I'll keep that open just in case. Anyway, he begins with the 2010 story, as he describes it, of James O'Keefe trying to lure a CNN contributor onto a boat stocked with dildos. Good morning, everybody. It's a morning program. Dildos. And by the way, can we take a brief moment? I think we can, just because this is the kind of show this is, to say dildos, plural. I don't know if there's an E in there. It's a very small point. Like potatoes, it's a kind of a tricky one, but I think I am thinking that probably dildos would be fine as a plural, and it looks funny with dildos. It's not toes, it's not potatoes, so I don't know. But maybe people are taking their cues from that. Can we get a Merriam-Webster call on that one? Is dildo in there? I assume it's in there. In the most clinical sense. Anyway, he tries to lure a CNN contributor onto a boat stocked with dildos, which I have affectionately termed since then the SS dildo, only to have his plan exposed, no pun intended, by one of his staffers. There is an important point in this. Now, he goes on to list several other cell phones, also from 2010. O'Keefe's attempt to sting Louisiana Senator Mary Landrieu, and her office ends with a misdemeanor conviction for the prankster Prince, as Will puts it. He was arrested. And so I think we have a framing issue with James O'Keefe. He's a prankster. Even CNN didn't really, I don't think, fully get what they were talking about. I'm looking at the link that he provides, and it's a good write-up of it. It's from CNN. They deserve first crack at it. The reporter in question was, at the time, working for CNN. I believe she now works for ABC News. And we're talking here about, who is this? It's, what's her name? Abby Boudreau was then a CNN investigative correspondent, I believe, according to her Twitter bio, which is the ultimate source on anything. She works, I think, for Good Morning America, as a matter of fact, over at ABC. And, anyway, here's the thing. This is CNN's write-up of it. They should get first crack at it and at defining what happened here. And I think they botch it. I really do. Let me see if I can't get this thing up on screen here. All right. Fake pimp from Acorn videos tries to punk CNN correspondent. And the URL uses the word prank rather than punk. It's O'Keefe.cnn.prank appears, that's their tag for it in the URL. Scott Zamost is the writer on this one. And again, this goes back to September 29th, 2010. The story, and by the way, gosh, there's layers and layers on everything. So the story begins, but there's an editor's note up at the top. And now I have to pause and discuss the editor's note. Okay, what has happened here? Know what? Here's how I'll do it. I'm going to go to the story. We'll go back to the editor's note. Despite the fact that they want us to read it first, I think it needs some context. Here's the deal. A conservative activist, this is the write-up. A conservative activist known for making undercover videos plotted to embarrass a CNN correspondent by recording a meeting on hidden cameras aboard a floating, quote, palace of pleasure, unquote, and making sexually suggestive comments, emails, and sexually suggestive comments. That's what he was going to do. This is shown by emails and a planning document. That's basically what is happening here. In other words, conservative activist, maybe a misnomer, known for making undercover videos, clearly not a good description of what he does. It's that he makes, he falsifies videos. But in 2010, they weren't ready to say this, even though it was already well known. But they still weren't ready to say it. A conservative activist, no, he's not, known for making undercover videos, which are fake, plotted to embarrass a CNN correspondent by recording a meeting on hidden cameras aboard a floating a palace of pleasure, and making sexually suggestive comments, emails, and a planning document show. Get it? Okay. So once again, I pause. We can debate all day about whether or not it's fair to simply say he's a conservative activist. Might not even be fair to say he's conservative. Because honestly, does a conservative anything fill a boat full of dildos and invite people in there? I don't know. Oh, by the way, Jingy, our friend Real Jingy, a constant listener to the show, hi, how you doing, says, no, it's pronounced dildoes. And that changes everything. And now we understand why they put an E in there. They're not, it's one dildo, two dildoes. You understand? Okay. That's a good one. Anyway, so, there's nothing conservative about filling a boat with dildos. It doesn't help it float, as far as I'm aware, although some of them probably do float. I don't know. But, okay, we're already off the track simply by referring to right-wingers as conservative. I know that's shorthand. We should change it. We should seek to change that language. Activist, maybe. Undercover videos, not enough. Got it. We hit all those things, right? So, he seeks to embarrass a CNN correspondent by inviting her to a boat full of dildos and making sexually suggestive comments. Time out. I understand that we didn't get this perspective in 2010, though we should have, and it was 100% obvious to us. There's no reason in the world why we should have skipped over this, but we did because whatever, the culture that we contribute to, of course, still hadn't adequately prepared me and maybe most other people, maybe just most men, I don't know, for this framing. But recent events change the way we ought to have viewed this. This wasn't a plot to embarrass a CNN correspondent. This was sexual predation. This was sexual harassment and a attempted sexual assault, and essentially, in his wildest dreams, for the plot anyway, revenge porn, which is just flat out illegal in several states because lawmakers have come to recognize this weird emerging trend and this strange and criminal and abusive use of video in a sexual context. It wasn't going to just be embarrassing to show up on a boat full of dildos, boing, like snakes in a can of peanut brittle. This was a woman reporter being invited to essentially an isolated location. A houseboat, is going to be very different, even if it's docked next to other houseboats. It's just a different environment from anywhere else, really. I mean, a public space. He was luring her to a private home for the purpose of entrapping her in a highly charged, highly suggestive sexual situation, which he was only going to add to with his own comments. And he was videotaping it, and God knows where this was going to lead. This was a plot to perpetrate a sexual assault against the CNN reporter. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a punking. It was an attempted sexual assault, and we ought to recognize it as such. And in hindsight, now we know James O'Keefe needs to be labeled as a sex predator. That's what he is. That's what he does. What's his most famous so-called prank? It involves teenage prostitution. Come on. I mean, I don't know how many opportunities we need to give the guy to reveal his true self. Everyone should be able to see it by now. And yet we don't. Yet we pretend it's something entirely different. He's just fooling around. He's just pranking us all. He's just, he's leading us around by the nose and And sure, some of these things might, but people don't even register that it involves sexualized situations. And we really need to be able to kind of recognize that and label it for what it is, because it becomes relevant today for a lot of reasons. Back to the article from 2010. James O'Keefe, best known for hitting the community organizing group Acorn with an undercover video sting, which, by the way, centered around attempting to get them to help with underage prostitution. Why that? Because everything they do is projection. But okay. And, I wonder, by the way, does the fact that they thought that they might even be able to catch somebody lending them a hand on this, I wonder if that comes from the same place as Pizzagate, in a way. I mean, it precedes the Pizzagate story by a long time, but I don't know that it comes from a different place. So that's what O'Keefe was supposedly best known for at the time. Of course, it says he hoped to get CNN investigative correspondent Abby Boudreau, and I don't know why her. I can't remember why her. Maybe that's in this article. Onto a boat filled with sexually explicit props, and then record the session those documents show. Now, again, there's something very specific and very special, for lack of a better term, that O'Keefe clearly thought he was going to get by luring a woman to an isolated location and into a room filled with sexually explicit props. In other words, what they were hoping to get, and maybe it's entirely possible that he wasn't really, really, really deep down thinking about exactly what he was doing and exactly what he was going to get. But again, in today's context, in looking at Roy Moore, in considering even Al Franken, in considering John Conyers, in considering Donald Trump, in considering all of what we now understand, finally, some of us slow in understanding it, about sexual harassment and sexual assault and sexualized tensions anywhere, in the workplace, in public, wherever. What did we think really was going to happen by throwing a young woman reporter trapped in a room with a kind of creepy looking, sweaty weirdo trying to do God knows what? And all of a sudden, everything in the room is a sexually explicit prop, and he begins propositioning her sexually. I mean, he might have thought, oh, she'll be embarrassed because plastic penises. Ha, everybody's embarrassed by plastic penises. Well, nobody feels super comfortable about being filmed standing around them, I guess, except possibly the manufacturers of such items and those who are so jaded to their use or who are professionally involved in their use that they've overcome those. Clearly, a regular CNN correspondent is going to say, I feel like I'm in the wrong place. But it would very likely be very different for a woman than a man. And he was hoping, while he might have been hoping to I was just looking to embarrass her, not frighten her into believing that she was imminently in danger of sexual assault. But that's likely what would have happened. And I believe, and I don't know if it's addressed in this article, but now I believe that that little tidbit that Will Sommer feeds us in that tweet, that the plan is exposed by one of his staffers. Who are James O'Keefe's staffers? Typically, just as in his latest caper, they tend to be young women themselves. And I wonder whether it was obvious to his assistants what the true implications of this caper, this wacky prank, really were. And she saw that O'Keefe either didn't see it or didn't care or refused to recognize it as such, and that happens a lot. You bring it up to somebody who's about to do something like this, or who's joking about something like this, or just discussing something like this in an improper context, which is really any context, but anything that doesn't recognize it for what it is, and you point it out to them, and they get, sometimes what happens is they get embarrassed that they didn't see this themselves, and that sparks a lot of defensive maneuvering and insistence that that wasn't what it was really about. We were just trying to prank her. It wasn't really supposed to be a sexualized assault, but that's what it is, and it's really up to the victim at this point to decide what was it really. And I wonder whether Abby Boudreau probably, at the time, part of the defense would likely be, well, at the time she didn't, for instance, file charges. I don't know whether she could have or whether they would have stood up in court because of the nature of how the thing fell apart. But she very likely tried to brush it off. This is where this storyline will become familiar. Oh, at the time, I laughed it off. I'm glad the whole thing got blown up or whatever. And I don't know what he thought he was trying to do, but he's crazy. Ha ha. And really, though, just below the surface, I wonder if it wasn't the case that she thought, what was I really in for here? And why did he think that there was some particular value in entrapping me in a sexualized situation? That had to have been because I was a woman. But there's lots of women out there. Why me? Why did he pick me? I'm not sure. How narrowly did I escape something horrific? But it's a man's world out there, and I need to laugh this thing off and just be tough like the rest of my fellow correspondents, etc., and get over this and move on. And I guess she did, and she, stayed in the profession and moved on to a better position, I guess, with Good Morning America. And congratulations for all of that. But I wonder whether, looking back in today's context with this kind of prompt about how rethinking this whole episode, does she now say, you know what? I shouldn't have laughed that off. That's exactly the kind of problem we're talking about right now, that these predators just pitch these situations, and if caught, say, I was just joking, just like the old Rush Limbaugh line. I was just kidding. Where's your sense of humor? You're one of those humorless feminists. You didn't see the obvious hilarity of being trapped in an isolated place down by the waterfront, by the way. I live in a van down by the river. I live in a boat down on the river. Were there other people around? I don't know. But a private residence, lured there, filled with sex toys. I've got a camera rolling. I'm making sexually suggestive comments. I have a whole plan. I've got accomplices just like Harvey Weinstein. But at the last minute, one of them, probably a young woman, balked about trapping me in a sex dungeon. So I, that's what we ought to be talking about here. And it'll take a massive push I think, to make this the case. But really, honestly, I don't know what it takes to defeat James O'Keefe. Maybe there's nothing, because he's got an audience that just doesn't give a goddamn one way or the other what he's doing, what he's lying about. What he's doing today is, walking. He got totally owned by the Washington Post. And we'll read that story, perhaps, just to discuss it a little bit, to give some context to it. But you've surely heard it by now. But he's walking around insisting to his fans that he totally owned the Post. I'll show you the video. He's got a video out there now that he claims is another blockbuster. And it's him walking around the Washington Post, or rather, his accomplice walking around the Washington Post, trying to get them to say something improper or do something improper, and they won't do it. That's all. And he's like, look at this evidence of huge crime. And he's trying so hard to find a crime. He's the criminal in all of this. As others have observed with the Washington Post stunt, what he's doing, of course, is, in case you haven't heard the basic story, he gets a young woman accomplice to go to the Washington Post with a fake story about having been sexually assaulted by Roy Moore, with the idea in mind that they'll tell their story, the Washington Post, because they don't give a crap about journalism, and they're just partisan hacks, in his mind, are going to jump on it, they're going to report it, they're going to just take her dictation and print it, because they don't care about slandering Roy Moore at all in the least, and they never fact check, and then we'll spring it on him. Ha ha! This was a setup. I'm a fake. I lied to you, and you printed it just the same. Shame on you. But of course, what happened is, because the Washington Post is a professional organization filled with journalists, as much as we attack them for missing this, that, or the other thing, they didn't miss this. They did the same process that they did with the Roy Moore stories from the beginning. They double-checked. They looked for corroborating witnesses and corroborating stories. They had her tell the same story to them several times and caught her in inconsistencies and confronted her about them. They got so suspicious, they ended up following her, and they watched her walk into the Project Veritas offices in New York, totally blowing her cover because she's an idiot, not a real operative of any kind, right? So, the upshot of the story, in one sense, is, of course, it validates all of the reporting that the Washington Post did in the first place on all of this. They double-checked everything. They doubted everything. They approached everything skeptically until finally they couldn't wait on the story any longer because it checked out. Hers checked out as a lie immediately, and they told her so, and she was busted. That's what happened. So the upshot of the story is, everything they've printed on Roy Moore so far is likely true, and the conspiracy theory that O'Keefe exists to prove, he lives to prove this, that the Washington Post and other so-called liberal media are, in fact, just lying about conservatives for fun and profit, is also not true. witness our attempt to prove that it is true falling flat on its face. So, in addition to all of this, on top of this, the next layer of this thing is, what it also means is that James O'Keefe and whoever he's cooperating with, and there's lots of theorizing now, is he working with Steve Bannon? Is he working with the Moore campaign? Is he coordinating with Trump people at the national level? Probably all true, and we can get into the evidence of all of that perhaps later on in the show. But what he's doing, whoever he's working with or for, is working to undermine the claims of all sexual assault victims, not just Moors, but this would be used against anybody. If you claim victimization claim to be the victim of a sexual assault, you're probably lying, because look what we just did. We just lied and we got away with it, and so therefore you did the same. Again, projection, but it's projection on yet another level, which we'll discuss after this next break. But essentially what it is he's a paid operative who's out there trying to undermine the very concept of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Now, why they chose him, there are probably several reasons, but it should not be overlooked that he may have his own personal motivation for undermining claims of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and it is because he himself is a sexual predator. We just talked about this. In 2010, he attempted to set up Abby Boudreau for a possible sexual assault, and really, honestly, I don't know what level he was looking to take it to, but luring a woman to an isolated location filled with sex toys is a sexual assault, period. It didn't happen, thank God, but this was an attempted sexual assault by a sexual predator that we misunderstood at the time, and we should redefine now under the current circumstances, and that may be the only thing that can ever take James O'Keefe down. Let's throw him into the fire in this particularly charged atmosphere and see if it works. Why not? We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring, monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. When we left, I was in the middle of one rant that could take me all the way through the entire show. And that is, I implore you, it basically comes down to this. I implore you to understand James O'Keefe in the context of his sexual predations. I don't know really, now that I think about it, that anything defines him better. And like I said, people have been looking for ways to rid ourselves of the plague of James O'Keefe for a long time. He's just that odious a character. And, it may be that nothing works because his chief audience doesn't care about anything. YOLO, nothing matters, nothing will sink in with them. They don't care what it is. And they, I think, embody the worst, hardest core of the alt-right, which of course is tinged with a number of other terrible hardcore things like Nazism and white supremacy. But at the core of all of the branches of alt-rightism, and I'm not entirely certain that they're all necessarily racist, white separatist, white nationalist Nazis, but it's beginning to look that way. But I think they all share a common trait, and it overlaps with even the more traditionalist, I guess, for lack of a better term, right-wing and ultra-right as well, even if they don't consider themselves alt-right, which is that it is more important to them to essentially to own the libs on something than to do the right thing or prove their ideology makes any goddamn sense one way or the other. They're just interested in twisting the knife. That's the basic essence of alt-rightism, and I think that he fits that description very well. Anyway, so like I said, it may be that it has no effect with his fans, but it might have an effect on the larger world, and we clearly still need to have an impact on the way the larger world sees James O'Keefe, because they continually report on him as though he were either just a regular guy activist who happens to be so-called conservative, even though that definition has changed dramatically over the years, or a merry prankster of sorts, but just with a right-wing outlook on the world, and he really isn't, and we ought to change that. And if there was ever a moment to shift that perception to one which recognizes his sexual predation, I would have to guess that moment is now. So, continuing with the 2010 story of his attempt to lure then CNN investigative correspondent Abby Boudreau onto a boat filled with sexually explicit props and then record the session, we continue with this. The plan apparently was thwarted after Boudreau was warned minutes before it was supposed to happen. In other words, somebody on O'Keefe's staff said, I just can't let this sexual assault go down uninterrupted. What am I going to do? How do I live down having been an accomplice to videotaping a sexual assault? I just can't, and so therefore I can't go through with it. I never intended to become part of the story, Boudreau said, but things suddenly took a very strange turn. And there's another impulse that she's fighting here. I mean, she's essentially a sexual assault victim, doesn't want to see herself that way. Who would want to? Certainly don't want to define yourself that way if you can avoid it at all. And then, of course, she has the additional excuse available to her, the journalist's credo, I never intended to become part of the story. Well, it's not a story anymore. There's a sexual assault happening, and you were the intended victim of it. It's not a story if you tell the police you're not in the story anymore. Somebody else has to report this story. This is the story of an attempted sexual assault. You're the victim of it. Someone else needs to have the byline. You can write an opinion piece on it later if you like. O'Keefe, it continues, is best known for making a series of undercover videos inside Acorn offices around the country in 2009. The 40-year-old liberal group was crippled by scandal after O'Keefe and fellow activist Hannah Giles, I never did learn her name, allegedly solicited advice from Acorn workers on setting up a brothel and evading taxes. Hardy har har, another sexualized context involving young women. Whoops, a pattern is emerging, which we forgot about for some reason. I am certain that there are those of you who never forgot and are banging your head against the desk that I would admit that I did, but I did. What can I tell you? I make mistakes. And I hope we'll all correct this one. Maybe none of you men saw it. I don't know. I'm a super genius and I beat you all to the punch. I doubt it. We have a great audience. I give you a lot of credit. The videos led to some of the employees being fired and contributed to the disbanding of Acorn, subject for another week's worth of shows, of course. But Acorn, which advocated for low and middle income and worked to register voters, advocated for, that's all it says, low and middle income. Low and middle income people, advocated for the low and middle income classes, whatever. You know what Acorn did. Point is, it was false and it spooked Democrats in Congress into forcing its disbanding. It sort of came back in other forms, but one of the huge self-owns of the modern era for the Democratic Party as well. Just we'll throw that one in there. Prosecutors in New York, of course, eventually found no evidence of wrongdoing by the group, but too late. And the California probe found the videos had been heavily and selectively edited. And of course, that success nonetheless only launched 1,000 imitators. And we spent the early parts of the 2016 presidential election cycle dealing with the fallout of that, thanks to the fake videos about Planned Parenthood. And they're on the verge still of possibly destroying that organization as well. Democrats, only a few of whom have learned anything at all from the Acorn episode, managing to hold the line, at least for a while, on Planned Parenthood. O'Keefe's next big splash ended with his arrest after he taped associates entering Louisiana Senator Mary Landrieu's office in New Orleans, posing as telephone repairmen. You all remember that one, of course. He ended up pleading guilty to a misdemeanor charge of entering a federal office under false pretenses and is now on probation. I don't know how long the probation lasted, but just to throw things back into current context, right? Okay, James O'Keefe is a sexual predator. Oh, I don't know. I think you're mischaracterizing it, et cetera, et cetera. Really, what do you have that proves that? He says he's not. You say he is. It's a he said, she said situation. All right, let me use one of your favorite tactics in he said, she said situations. The man has an arrest record. How's that? He's no angel. He's had run-ins with the law. Dun, dun, dun. I know I have that sound effect somewhere, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to bring it up. I don't need it. We'll move on. But, that's exactly how they would attack anybody else in this situation. So he's got a arrest record, but the article continues, he continues to do undercover projects through his organization, which is called Project Veritas. Another pause just for a moment to say the group's name is Project Veritas. Their latest prank, it's a prank, everybody, we're just kidding, is to go into the Washington Post and lie to them about a sexual assault. We lie. Why? Because Veritas. YOLO, nothing matters. We still can't dismiss this guy from society. The incident occurred in August when Boudreaux agreed to meet O'Keefe to discuss CNN's request to be present on set for a music video shoot in which O'Keefe stars. I don't know what the F that was about. I don't know why the F CNN would request to be on set for that. But that gives us reason to return to the top of the article where there was the editor's note. I told you I needed more context for the editor's note. Simple enough editor's note, right? Run of the mill. No one would take notice of this except me. Takes notice of all this stuff because I hate everybody. That's what the show is about. Here's the editor's note. CNN takes an unprecedented look inside the young conservative activist movement in the documentary Right on the Edge, which airs October 2nd and 3rd at 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This, of course, would have been, I assume, back in 2010 when they aired this thing. I don't know whether the editor's note is that they're trying to air. Well, it clearly wouldn't be of any use now. So this was an article from September 29th, 2010. So October 2nd and 3rd, they were showing this this documentary or whatever. And by the way, note that in 2010, October 2nd and 3rd were Eastern Standard Time. Is that right? Remember the days when we returned to Standard Time at a decent part of the year and not waiting for after Halloween? Anyway, there you go. Yet another topic for more discussion. So why am I upset about the editor's note? Take this in context. The editor's note, again, it's been misunderstood what has happened here. CNN is now reporting, without realizing it, that James O'Keefe just tried to sexually assault one of their reporters. Why? Because she asked to be on set when he made a music video? Really? That can't be the motivation, but suppose it was. How bizarre is that? He just tried to sexually assault one of your reporters. But by the way, CNN features him in a thrilling documentary airing October 2nd and 3rd at 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please tune in. In other words, they're still doing the same goddamn thing they do now, almost a decade later. Horrific, horrible person. A guy who just tried to entrap a young woman reporter in a sex dungeon to assault her on videotape. But by the way, we profile this intriguing figure on October 2nd and 3rd at 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. EST. Do join us for that. And that was brought to mind because we had just gotten to the point where we figured out why was Boudreaux agreeing to meet him at all? Because CNN wanted to be on set to cover the fact that he's doing a music video. This intriguing why he likes Panera, I bet. And he's probably a dapper dresser at that. We've had this problem since forever. These idiot lunatic, antisocial, sociopathic, psychopathic, who knows what, potential killers, for God's sake. For all I know, I'm going to lure you onto my sex dungeon boat down by the river. I don't know what the F this guy is up to, but golly gee, if he doesn't shop and drink coffee just like the rest of us, we're back at the same goddamn thing. We've been doing this since forever. These people are disgusting and have no place being covered on television watched by normal people. But please do tune in October 2nd and 3rd. Are you kidding me? For months, CNN has been following a group of young conservative activists, including Christian Hartsock, the director of the music video. The activists will be featured in a documentary, Right on the Edge, that will air October 2nd and 3rd. This sexual predation is brought to you by CNN and co-promoted with our other brand, Right on the Edge, airing October 2nd and 3rd. Ha, ha, ha. These merry pranksters who almost, possibly videotaped the rape of one of our reporters. Why Boudreaux never pressed them on this, I don't know. Maybe she did. Maybe that's why she's at ABC. It wasn't just an upward career move that was routine that all reporters seek out, but rather, I don't feel safe working for CNN anymore. I've got questions. I don't know that she'll agree with any of my assessment, but I have questions about this. Maybe I could ask her. Do you think she would answer me? I don't know. O'Keefe called Boudreaux. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped a small paragraph here. Hartsock, the music video director, said O'Keefe did not want CNN to shoot on the set of the music video. Okay, so just say no, right? But said he would encourage O'Keefe to call CNN to discuss the request. Fine. So here's how he discusses the request. Come to my dungeon. O'Keefe called Boudreaux on August 10th. During the conversation, he said he preferred that Boudreaux meet him in person in Maryland and asked that she come alone. Are you kidding? I just want to talk, O'Keefe told Boudreaux on the phone. So this is how he deals with CNN reporters. Come alone. I just want to talk. But what he's really planning is to secretly sexually assault you on videotape and then use it for I don't know what purpose, to end your career, most likely, as blackmail. I just want to talk. I just want to have a, meeting with you and talk to you face to face about this, because I feel sort of, let's just say, reserved about letting people into my sort of inner sanctum, about letting people sort of take a glimpse into behind the scenes. So that's why, I just feel more comfortable if it was just me and you and we just had a face to face meeting before I agreed to let you guys come out and shoot the video shoot out there. That's the quote from him. Now, by the way, the nonsense involved in this also layers thick, right? I feel uncomfortable letting you into my inner sanctum, et cetera, et cetera. You're shooting a music video. That's not your inner sanctum. That's a public, while the shoot may not be a public event, what are you going to do with the music video? I'm going to lock it in a man-sized vault, right? And nobody's ever going to see it. I'm going to put it in there with the Day the Clown Cried with Jerry Lewis. It's a music video. It's meant for distribution. This isn't your private life. It's the making of a music video. If you're now you're so private, right? All of a sudden, yesterday I was a pimp, and the day after that I was breaking into a federal office, and now I'm trying to entrap a CNN reporter in a sex dungeon because she asked to film me filming something that wasn't one of my sting operations, but a music video. So in order to get back at her for asking, can I get on your set? Why not just say no, you can't be on the set, and leave it at that? You'd be perfectly fine. But instead, he hatches a plan. I got an idea. I'm going to assault this woman and then use the revenge porn that I make from it to try and damage her career. Why? Because she asked if she could film me filming a music video. This is a vicious predator, folks. He's a sociopath and belongs in prison. We've been thinking about this guy wrong the whole time. I have, anyway. Maybe you have joined me in that. Don't be embarrassed. I'll say so first. I made a mistake. I thought of him as not, while I wouldn't agree with the merry prankster characterization, it didn't occur to me until reconsidering this event in light of the most current events, and particularly in light of the fact that he was seeking to undermine the stories of sexual assault victims, not just probably for political gain for Roy Moore, but I would say probably for personal reasons as well. If I ever get accused or caught in another sex dungeon trap plot, and somebody has the good sense to accuse me of exactly what I actually am doing, I need something to be able to point to undermine people's claims about this stuff. So I'll manufacture one. The fact that I can get paid by somebody else to do it in current circumstances is just a bonus for him. Anyway, the article continues. The phone call was recorded without Boudreau's knowledge, by the way. She didn't even record this phone call. He did. CNN obtained a copy of the recording after O'Keefe emailed it to friends and colleagues. Boudreau agreed to the meeting, which she understood would be in his office. How about that? The purpose of the meeting, his office on a boat. The purpose of the meeting was to explain the CNN story in person to James, Boudreau said. CNN was forwarded an email sent from O'Keefe's email address to the executive director of Project Veritas, Izzy Santa. Are you kidding me? That's their actual name? Izzy, I-Z-Z-Y, Santa. Is he Santa? No, he's not. He's a pervert. And two conservative activists. I got to read this again. CNN was forwarded an email sent from O'Keefe's email address to the executive director of Project Veritas, Izzy Santa, and two conservative activists. Ben Wetmore. Honestly, that's your name? Ben Wetmore. Good Lord. You couldn't make up a worse bunch of names. And Jonathan Burns of St. Louis, Missouri. Wetmore is from New Orleans, by the way. Dated after the call with Boudreau. Getting closer, the email states. Audio attached, conversation with Abby. What do you think of her reaction, guys? Period. By the way, good punctuation. She said she could do it Monday, Tuesday. Ben, you think I could get her on the boat? Already plotting this thing. Because, why? Because he recorded his own phone conversation saying, I'm lying to you about what I want to do. I really want to possibly rape you on camera. She's done nothing wrong, folks. Boudreau flew to Baltimore on August 17th, rented a car, and drove to suburban Lusby, Maryland, where O'Keefe wanted to meet. I'm sure the world headquarters of Project Veritas is Lusby, Maryland, ladies and gentlemen. O'Keefe sent a text message to Boudreau that morning saying that Santa, not Santa Claus, but Izzy Santa, would meet her when she got there. When Boudreau arrived at the address, a house located on a tributary to the Paxton River, Santa approached her with a tape recorder in her hand. Okay, so I guess that tells us that Izzy Santa is a woman, as I guessed earlier. You can't tell from the name. Santa approached her with a tape recorder in her hand and said she wanted to talk in the car, Boudreau said. Oh, maybe Izzy wasn't the one that tipped her off. I don't know. Let's see. I noticed she had a little bit of dirt on her face. Her lip was shaking. She seemed really uncomfortable, and I asked her if she was okay. Boudreau said. The first thing, I guess it is her. The first thing she basically said to me was, I'm not recording you. I'm not recording you. Are you recording me? I said, no, I'm not recording you. And she showed me her digital recorder, and it was not recording. But again, more projection from these people. I'm not recording you. I'm not recording you. She's now nervous and shaking like a leaf, promising I'm not recording you. Are you recording me? No, I'm not recording you. Why would I be recording you? You're not my interview subject. But I think you're always secretly recording me because evil liberal media always trying to entrap us innocent conservative activists and merry pranksters. Well, don't worry about it. I'm not recording you. I never had any intention of recording you. You thought so because you're a paranoid freak. That's why you thought I was recording you. And once again, projection. Santa told Boudreau that O'Keefe planned to, quote, punk her by getting on a boat where hidden cameras were set up. Boudreau said she would not get on the boat and asked Santa why O'Keefe wanted her there. Izzy told me that James was going to be dressed up and have strawberries and champagne on the boat, and he was going to hit on me the whole time. Boudreau said, oh, that's not sexual harassment. It's a punking. It's a prank. Hee hee. Well, even Izzy Santa could tell that wasn't correct. A short time later, O'Keefe emerged from the boat docked behind the house. In that brief conversation, so it's not isolated enough that he's got her in a house off a tributary of the Paxton River in Lusby, Maryland. He's going to put her on a boat behind the house. And why not in the dungeon in the basement, in an old well where he can lower lotion to her in a basket? Would that be any different? I don't think so. So a short time later, O'Keefe emerged from the boat docked behind the house. In that brief conversation, Boudreaux told O'Keefe that he did not have permission to record her and reminded him that the meeting was solely to discuss the upcoming music video shoot, and he had never mentioned that he wanted to tape their meeting. Remember that the whole premise of the meeting was, I just want to, face to face because inner sanctum, blah, blah, blah. But no, he's secretly not only plotting this assault, but to tape it. Boudreaux ended the meeting and left. After the incident, Santa gave CNN a series of emails she says shows O'Keefe intended to try to embarrass both the network and Boudreaux through an elaborate plan. And wouldn't that be embarrassing for CNN? Haha, I raped your reporter. Gotcha. It's you who should be embarrassed by this. Really? Well, that's the way conservatives / alt-right / ultra-rightist / Nazi wacko jerk-offs think about sex. Haha, I raped you. You've been polluted. It's not me who should be embarrassed for being a filthy predatory criminal who belongs in jail. It's you who should be embarrassed by my having polluted you with my sex. That's literally the way they think about things. Why? They're trained to. I told you it was a sex cult from the beginning, didn't I? Come on. The day of the meeting, she wrote, I guess I should back up just a little bit. All right. Boudreaux ended the meeting and left. After the incident, Santa gave CNN the series of emails that shows O'Keefe intended to try to embarrass both the network and Boudreaux through an elaborate plan. The day of the meeting, she wrote to someone she described as a financial donor to Project Veritas. She would not identify the individual. I have a problem on my hands, she says, that I think has the potential for unnecessary backlash. We never got the backlash. Let us have that now, please. Unnecessary backlash, Santa wrote. Today, James is meeting with a CNN correspondent today on his boat. It says today twice. She is doing a piece on the movement of young conservative filmmakers. She doesn't know she's getting on a boat, but rather James's office. I don't know what that's supposed to be. She doesn't know she is getting on a boat, but rather James's office. I guess she thought she was going to James's office, didn't know she was getting on a boat. James has staged the boat to be a palace of pleasure. Again, that terminology, I don't even know where that comes from. Rape, it's such a pleasure. With all sorts of props, wants to have a bizarre sexual conversation with her. He wants to gag CNN. He thinks CNN is going to stop broadcasting because he raped one of their reporters. Joke's on you, everybody. You'll never report again, CNN. I guess he thinks that's going to work. She wrote that the idea is incredibly bad, and the more I think about it, we should not be doing this. Essentially, what's happening here, once again, Izzy Santa is in the position of, and I guess this highlights another part of the wider sexual harassment story. She's in the position of Harvey Weinstein's female assistants, young woman assistants who were supposed to set these encounters, these rapes up for Harvey Weinstein and lure the victims into thinking they're safe because there's another young woman present, and certainly no sexual harassment would go on in this context, and then they disappear. Harvey Weinstein's accomplices apparently never lost their nerve and tipped anybody off that I know of. Maybe those stories have yet to emerge. I assume that he isn't 100% successful in every one of his rape attempts, and somebody escapes somewhere along the line, and they're probably just quietly counting their blessings at some point. But eventually, probably a story will appear at some point where somebody says, you know what? His new assistant warned me off and she quit the next day. But I anticipate that. I have not seen it yet. But Izzy Santa is essentially in the position of, amazingly, she has more conscience about what's going on than Harvey Weinstein's assistants did. And maybe Harvey Weinstein's assistants rationalized it to themselves in some stupid way that is horrific, and I don't even know how to analyze it, as, well, it's a sexualized business and it's Hollywood and blah, blah, blah. But somehow Izzy Santa recognized that, a CNN reporter coming over to negotiate the terms of filming you while you were filming a music video isn't exactly a movie casting couch type situation, which is not to be dismissed and not to be accepted in any way, shape, or form as making the assault either more understandable or more acceptable, but just as an excuse that people give themselves. Anyway, I guess credit to Izzy Santa. Whatever happened to Izzy Santa? Do we know? We should follow up with her about this story. Credit to her for blowing this thing up, I guess. Credit not due to at least some of Harvey Weinstein's assistant. Anyway, O'Keefe, the story goes on to say, had also instructed Santa to print a Pleasure Palace graphic on a large poster, according to an email. This, I guess, just goes to what kind of a sexual infant are we dealing with over here anyway. I don't know what, it doesn't take more than 2 seconds, quite frankly, of looking at O'Keefe. Just look at his face, and I guess you get a good sense of maybe where he's coming from in the sexual background. But I digress. A Pleasure Palace graphic. I love that euphemism that they've come up with for all that. It's a rape room, essentially. And if Saddam Hussein had done this, I don't think anybody would have let him or Uday or Qusay get away with calling those rooms pleasure palaces, even if they did have graphics on large posters. CNN later obtained a copy of a 13-page document titled CNN Caper. It's just a caper, which appears to describe O'Keefe's detailed plans for that day. In other words, he had a Bret Easton Ellis-style diary about his planned sexual predations, and we all just think he's a conservative activist out there fighting for good old family values in the USA. He's a rapist, and we missed it. I missed it. Maybe you didn't. I don't know. I'm intrigued by this. I guess this is going to be the whole show, and why not? This should be the straw that breaks the camel's back on James O'Keefe. Why couldn't it be? It's the moment. Let's seize it. I urge you once again to do the same. We'll be back after yet one more break. Yes, welcome back once again to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm losing my mind slowly as we lose the trajectory of the day and spend it all on James O'Keefe, but I gotta tell you, this is an important topic, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this. Basically, I think anybody who thinks that they have a plot to convince the world once and for all that James O'Keefe is a total fraud is probably fooling themselves. But if there's an opening for this here, this may be it. We can capitalize on the fact that the world is focused on coming to understand sexual predation for what it is, and we ought to take that opportunity. Look, if we're going to expunge John Conyers from the House, or possibly Al Franken from the Senate, then I think we need to have a full accounting. And everybody has been rightly, I think, focused on the fact that Donald Trump is going to have no such accounting. But Donald Trump, President of the United States, for better or for worse, the answer is, of course, for worse. And I'm not really sure he should be President of the United States, even legally or constitutionally speaking. But that just makes me a wacko. But James O'Keefe is certainly someone the right can afford to throw overboard. You should be asking everybody out loud today, when will the right disavow sexual predator James O'Keefe? We keep getting asked that about Al Franken. And look, James O'Keefe is pretty disposable, I think, to the right, even though they've spent a lot of money on him. I don't think they believe in him in a great deal. And he hasn't handed them a good old-fashioned owning in a long time, and he's been very expensive along the way. So what the hell? Why not set them up for this and allow them to boot him themselves? They won't, but that doesn't mean we can't help redefine how the rest of the traditional media sees him, and that it should become a haunting embarrassment that CNN spent any time on, let alone taking away from the report of a attempted sexual assault with an editor's note at the top that says, by the way, the attempted rapist is profiled in this fantastic new documentary that we're airing on October 2nd and October 3rd. Granted, at the time they wrote this, they didn't understand this thing correctly. I'm just trying to help. You can help me too. So, by the way, the CNN links here to, they make available excerpts from this document, this CNN caper the 13-page document that O'Keefe used to detail his plans for the event. I assume they've taken the most salacious stuff and put it in here, but maybe not. But if you want to, off the air, review just how sick and pathetic this guy is, and maybe I will. Who knows? Maybe I'll even do it on the air. Why not? I'll dedicate the rest of the week to exposing James O'Keefe as a rapist. That could be one of my greatest contributions of all time if I can make it stick. And if I can't, you can. We just say it enough, right? That's the plan. That's always been his plan. Why won't it work for us? We actually have evidence. The plans appeared so outlandish, the story continues, and so juvenile in tone, I questioned whether it was part of a second attempted punk, Boudreau said. But in a phone conversation, Santa confirmed the document was authentic. In other words, I took a look at this thing, and I could see why she would think this. The plan was so disgusting and outlandish, and as she says, juvenile in tone, that she thought, in other words, she thought that O'Keefe had put the whole thing together maybe after the fact and thought if he fake leaked it somehow through a third party to CNN and CNN reported on it, then he could jump out and say, ha, fooled you. That was a fake document just to see if you were dumb enough to print it. And I got you, man. And, you know, I guess you're right in being worried about that, considering what he's been up to in the last couple of days, trying to plant false stories with the Washington Post. But no, Izzy Santa says it's real. He really is this outlandish and juvenile. And, you know, juvenile is putting too good a spin on it. It's boys will be boys. He's just juvenile. No, he's a sex predator. And now you can see it. We didn't have the context, a lot of us, at the time to recognize what this was, which is a tragedy in itself, because during that time, the decades since and the decades before, people like Harvey Weinstein were counting on that willful blindness to rape everybody in sight and call it professionalism. But okay, that's another story. In a phone conversation, Santa confirmed the document was authentic. Listed under equipment needed is hidden cams on the boat, and a tripod and overt recorder near the bed, an obvious sex tape machine. That's an interesting term for it, but okay. Clearly, he wanted Boudreau to believe that it was his intention to produce a sex tape, which of course would have been of the used eventually as in the revenge porn genre, by the way, which just makes it that much more disgusting. But okay. And also, like we said, juvenile in tone. What is that? It's a sex tape machine. Okay, good word. Okay, whatever. Among the props listed were a condom jar, dildos, spelled without the E, by the way. Good on you, James. Posters and paintings of naked women, because chicks love posters and paintings of naked women. That's what makes it a pleasure palace, after all, right? Fuzzy handcuffs. I mean, this guy's idea of a pleasure palace, by the way, apparently comes from the Tom Hanks masterpiece Bachelor Party, or some such source as that. Fuzzy handcuffs and a blindfold. Oy vey. According to the document, help. Why am I in this hell? According to the document, O'Keefe was to record a video of the following script before Boudreau arrived. And I guess this was supposed to be the introduction of his revenge porn video. Ready? Here's the introduction. My name is James. I work in video activism and journalism. I am a rapist. I've been approached by CNN for an interview where I know what their angle is. They want to portray me and my friends as crazies, as non-journalists, as unprofessional, and likely as homophobes, racists, bigots, or bigots of some sort. Now, this is the introduction. Instead, I've decided to have a little fun. Instead of giving her a serious interview, I'm going to punk CNN. Abby has been trying to seduce me, to use me, in order to spin a lie about me. Can you imagine the projection involved in this? Abby's trying to seduce me. Well, I'll turn the tables and seduce her. And I know she's into it because she's trying to seduce me. This is what he imagines CNN. I want to videotape you videotaping a music video. I think that would be of interest to our listeners. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe CNN is full of idiots and has no idea what they're doing, but that's what we want to do. Now I'm on to you. You want my bod. Well, I'll give it to you, baby. I mean, what the F is this guy talking about? He thinks it's always a plot to get this guy. And he's going to foil the plot with his junk. Everyone loves my crotch. God damn it. I should never have bothered to ever try to produce podcasts suitable for broadcast. I got to tell you, this would be a different show. I don't know why I don't just let loose since nobody's broadcasting this one, but I'll try and keep it somewhat clean. Instead, I've decided to have a little fun by raping somebody. That's fun. And I know this is just going to get worse, but that's the beginning part of this introduction, right? I'm in video activism and journalism. No, you're not. You're a psychopath and a rapist. I've been approached by CNN for an interview. I know what their angle is. They want to portray me as crazy, as a non-journalist or unprofessional. And so to prove them wrong, I'm luring one of their women reporters to a sex dungeon I have secretly filled with dildos and paintings of naked women and fuzzy handcuffs. Why? Because I know she's into me, but I'm going to punk her with revenge porn to show her that I'm the professional around here. I'm the non-crazy. You're the one that's nuts. This is what he's doing with his time and money. And Donald Trump, for instance, through his foundation, gave him $10,000 to do it a couple of years ago. Just want to point that out. And we're covering this whole new episode as more merry pranksterism. This guy's a psychopath and he belongs in prison / hell. Eventually hell will take him. But in the meantime, this guy needs to be incarcerated or at the very least wearing an ankle monitor. This is not safe for the streets of America. Instead, I've decided to have a little fun. Instead of giving her a serious interview, I'm going to punk CNN. Abby has been trying to seduce me to use me because all the ladies want to seduce me and use me in order to spin a lie about me, which is that I'm crazy, which I'm helping you with this video. So I'm going to seduce her on camera to use her for a video. This bubble-headed bleach blonde. This is a quote from his tape. Now, this bubble-headed bleach blonde who comes on at 5 will get a taste of her own medicine. She'll get seduced on camera, and you'll get to see the awkwardness and the aftermath. Please sit back and enjoy the show. This is a plot to produce revenge porn. This guy has to go to jail. Why aren't charges being pressed for this? I want to know. So now I'm after you, James O'Keefe, and I'm not going to videotape you. I'm just going to tell everybody the story you already told the world and see what happens. Of course, it'll be ignored, certainly by your fans, but why isn't CNN using this? Where's Abby Boudreau? I don't blame her for not being on top of this or anything, but I would love to know what she thinks of this in retrospect. Boudreau, who has won multiple awards for investigative reporting, called the comments ridiculous. And, she's doing what women did at the time and still do today, letting it roll off her back. I don't blame her for it. I can't blame her for it. I have no idea what that would feel like, though you can see it would probably make me angry. But in the moment, who knows? I mean, to switch topics entirely, just for a second, because this is in the news too. Obviously, you know the story. You're a smart audience. You're political junkies. You've seen it. Yesterday's appearance with the Navajo code talkers in the White House, right? Blah, 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 something, something. He finds a way to work Pocahontas into the story. What do these guys do? Now, in a perfect world, they're still gritty, tough veterans, even at an advanced age, and they take their cane and they smash Donald Trump over his stupid head and break his hairdo. But they don't. They're awkwardly, they're trapped. Like, what am I going to do? First of all, who knows whether they heard him correctly or not? Second of all, I guess it's possible that there's an alternate theory of the Pocahontas slur out there, which deserves some consideration, which holds that some Native Americans view Elizabeth Warren's use of her claims of Indian heritage negatively, and that they are themselves insulted by it, and therefore Donald Trump is actually right in doing all this. Maybe those two guys are just like that, maybe not. It doesn't look like the Navajo Nation took things the same way that they did, but who knows what the relationship and how these two guys feel about the politics of the Navajo Nation. But they were stunned, not only because of their advanced age, but because anybody in that situation would likely be stunned. That's how we get to this whole sexual predation story of, well, society at large since time immemorial. People are stunned into silence or inaction. So it could certainly be that was driving. I'm very angry now. It's 7 years later. You know, if I had spent the previous 7 years screaming about this, I'd have a point. But my other point, well, I do have a point. The point is a different one. I would have had this other point, but now I have this point, which is at the time you just go, my mind is blown by this. I need time to process this. And then the world goes on and crazier things happen and you never get back to digest this thing and really look at this in the context that it belonged in. And now you've been handed this magical moment. I hesitate to use the word magical, of course, because it implies all sorts of things that are wonderful, which have nothing to do with the moment that we're actually in. But as if by some magic, we are handed again an opportunity to say, you know what? We can dispense with this problem and we can dispense with that problem. And we can't solve it all, but we can continue to address the problem of pervasive sexual abuse and assault and harassment, and the pervasive problem of the lying scumbag rapist, James O'Keefe. And hey, what two birds would you rather kill with one stone than those two? What are you waiting for? That's what I'm asking you today. Boudreaux, who has won multiple awards for investigative reporting, called the comments ridiculous. The document states it was written by Ben. According to the email chain obtained by CNN, Ben Wetmore sent the document to O'Keefe and Santa. In a statement emailed to CNN, O'Keefe wrote, "That is not my work product. When it was sent to me, I immediately found certain elements highly objectionable and inappropriate and did not consider them for 1 minute following it. Except, of course, for the videotaped introduction in which he said, 'This is an excellent plan, and I can't wait to whip it out and win.'" He did not respond to follow-up questions. Wetmore did not respond to our questions about the document. Instead, he posted a YouTube video criticizing CNN's coverage of the Acorn story. Good answer. Burns did not respond to CNN. The CNN caper document warned O'Keefe about how to handle potential problems. If CNN gets advanced warning and you find this out, you should simply cancel the operation, period. The document states, you are in a position of strength. Make her, that would be Boudreaux, come to you. To leave the boat kills the operation. The document discusses the potential fallout from the operation. If they pursue this as you are a creep, you should play it up with them initially, only to reveal that the tape was made beforehand, confirming this was a gag, the document states. Might have worked in 2010, and I guess it did. I don't know whether he followed the plan for the escape hatch here, but in 2017, I don't know that this is viewed the same way. If they, CNN, admit it was a gag, and I guess maybe they did, O'Keefe.cnn.prank, I was punked, right? If they admit it was a gag, you should release the footage and focus on the fact that they got punked. And make sure to emphasize Abby's name and overall status to help burden her career with this video incident and her bad judgment in pursuing you so aggressively. Again, to the sex cultists, it's all about the sex, right? She's so hot for me, but she's really just trying to use me. Can I be, is there a word, is appearance-ist a problem? Yeah, judging people by their appearances, it's a terrible thing to do. But 2 seconds in terrible land here for a second. Look at Abby Boudreaux, look at James O'Keefe, and tell me that this was all about her secret plot to get into his pants. All right. If you believe that, you're not listening to the show. I'm just guessing. Finally, the document then states, if they go on the attack, you should point out the hypocrisy in CNN using the inherent sexuality of these women to sell viewers and for ratings, passing up more esteemed and respectable journalists who aren't bubble-headed bleach blondes and keep the focus on CNN. I'll give you one guess. Let's all take a guess. If there's a cable news network that James O'Keefe likes better than CNN, does anybody think it might be Fox News? What a knock on CNN. They use bubble-headed bleach blondes who aren't even qualified to do this work. God, I love Fox News. Fappity. Sorry about that. Well, there you go, everybody. That's the thinking going on. CNN traveled to Pasadena, California for the music shoot involving O'Keefe, but was not permitted on set. By the way, why was James O'Keefe, who was on probation, permitted? Maybe had he not yet done the Landrew break-in? Was he not yet on probation? How is he getting? I thought he was isn't he a resident of New Jersey? On a boat in Lusby, Maryland. How does he get to California to shoot a music video? Is that okay with your probation officer? I don't know. Maybe I got the timeline backwards on that one. CNN traveled to Pasadena for the music shoot involving O'Keefe, but was not permitted on set. And that's all you had to do, right? I don't want them on set. Boom, they're not on set. Since the Maryland incident, O'Keefe has transferred all of Santa's duties to one of the Project Veritas directors. She got fired for saving Abby Boudreau from a rape. There you go. Santa's attorney, Christopher Markham, told CNN that Santa, quote, didn't want what could have happened to occur. She thought it may have been a threat to the organization. That was her worry, and didn't want it to happen to Boudreau, secondarily. Markham said even though Santa's duties were taken away from her, she is still on the Project Veritas payroll. Don't know if that's still the case 7 years later, but whatever. Ryan Sorba, one of the conservative activists, so-called, featured in the CNN documentary, said that O'Keefe told him about the planned prank about 2 weeks ago when they met for dinner in New York City. He's all over the place. He basically said he was going to pull a prank on Abby, and it didn't work out, Sorba said. He said, I can't talk about it right now. I can't go into any more detail. Sorba said since he was going to be part of the documentary, O'Keefe wanted to know about what had happened. Christian Hartsock, another Christian activist, or not Christian activist, although I'm sure he claims that, but that's his name. Christian Hartsock, another activist who is part of the documentary, told CNN that he knew nothing about O'Keefe's prank. If there is truth to this, it sounds like an attempt at satire. A very poor attempt at satire. That's some excuse, Hartsock said. And I wish I would have been made aware of it in advance, and I would have put a stop to it. I think it was a bad tactic if there was truth to it. Another little hedge there. Hartsock said O'Keefe was one of his closest friends. Does it change how I feel about James O'Keefe? Absolutely not. And that's, of course, what most of his supporters will say. That's what Hartsock said at the time. I've had plenty of friends who've made mistakes, like planning rapes in a dungeon. Well, he left that part out. So, what do you think? Do we have a case to make here? I think so. And, well, you know, this seems to be the context in which to make it. After all, what was it that he was trying to do with his latest plot to punk the Washington Post here? Well, whose account of it do you want to read here? We got the Washington Post has two different accounts of it here. We got one. Is it two different accounts here? It is kind of odd. Last night there was at 5:07 p.m. a botched. This was in the Fix, I guess. Callum Borcher's writing in the Fix here. A botched sting with a phony Roy Moore quote accuser was supposed to discredit the media. Like similar schemes, it did the opposite. That's the title of one of the two takes here, and I guess that's slightly different from this report from Sean Boberg and Aaron C. Davis. Also, Alice. I remember Alice. Alice's last name is Kreitz or Kretis or I'm not sure what. Crites. A woman approached the Post with a dramatic and false tale about Roy Moore. She appears to be part of undercover sting operation. That posted later at night, last night. Maybe we should take a look at that one. Or there's also the summation of the story that I actually first saw over at Slate, which put things this way. Right-wing group caught red-handed trying to feed Washington Post a fake Roy Moore story. Ben Mathis Lilly put that piece together. And quite honestly, I thought at least headline-wise, that got right to the heart of the matter. So maybe we'll depend on them, and interestingly enough, rather than the Washington Post in this. The Washington Post has caught a right-wing group run by infamous hoax perpetrator James O'Keefe. We're still not getting the framing right on this. Can't blame you. I think everybody should listen. I'm going to have to send this podcast around in the hopes of convincing people that they need to change their view of James O'Keefe here. Infamous hoax perpetrator James O'Keefe attempting to feed it a false accusation of sexual abuse against Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore, the paper reports in a Monday story, quoting which one here? The woman approached Post with dramatic and false story, the straight-up news story, not the fix analysis of it. In a series of interviews over 2 weeks, the woman shared a dramatic story about an alleged sexual relationship with Moore in 1992 that led to an abortion when she was 15. Of course, he had to throw abortion in there. The Post did not publish an article based on her unsubstantiated account. When Post reporters confronted her with inconsistencies in her story and an internet posting that raised doubts about her motivations, she insisted that she was not working with any organization, she was, that targets journalists. It does. But on Monday morning, Post reporters saw her walking into the New York offices of Project Veritas, which is not a sex dungeon boat, as it turns out, an organization that targets the mainstream news media and left-leaning groups. The context of this stunt, the Slate story continues, for those who have not been following the Moore story closely, is that Moore and his numerous Republican defenders have said that the numerous credible claims of sexual misconduct that have been lodged against him are being falsified by his enemies and spread by a liberal media that cares more about defeating his candidacy than reporting the truth. You should read the entire article, if only to reward the Post for its fine work, but I'd be remiss if I didn't note here that part of the reason that the woman who contacted the newspaper, Jamie Phillips, in case you want to know, Jamie Phillips, Jaime, Phillips, Phillips, in case you wanted to, let's say, follow up on what she was up to these days. The woman who contacted the newspaper, Jamie Phillips, got caught. The reason she got caught, because she'd also used her real name to set up a GoFundMe account page announcing her intention to undermine the liberal media. I'm moving to New York, the May 29th appeal said. I've accepted a job to work in the conservative media movement to combat the lies and deceit, which she spelled like receipt, which is incorrect. The lies and deceit of the liberal MSM. Good plan, Jamie Phillips and Project Veritas. It almost worked. It didn't. Thanks to Ben Mathis Lilly for that story. And, of course, the next story on the scroll for Slate, James O'Keefe's bungled Washington Post sting will not hurt him one bit. And that may even be true, although I do think it opens a unique window of opportunity to use against James O'Keefe, and no one deserves it more. Well, maybe one or two people in the world deserve it more, but they're already getting better backlash on it, like Harvey Weinstein. So anyway, let's see. What other, should we take a look at what the fix analysis is on all this? Is there analysis? I mean, does it go beyond what I don't think there's any possibility that there's analysis beyond what we did already that can surprise me. Although clearly the focus here, I think, is on the backhanded confirmation of the good work that the Washington Post did here and the veracity of the claims that Roy Moore's accusers are making. Speaking of Roy Moore and his accusers, there is a new entry of sorts in that timeline. It's minutia with respect to the things that Roy Moore is accused of, but I thought I would add it anyway, though we are coming up against a break. Perhaps we can go into detail about it later, but the upshot of it is this. Old Hickory House restaurant worker, customer, say Roy Moore was a regular, He was an irregular kind of guy, but a regular customer. Why does that matter? Well, you may recall that one of his accusers was working as a waitress at the Old Hickory House restaurant. And I guess one of the themes that emerged in the last couple of days is a woman by the name of Rhonda Ledbetter, by the way, says she worked as a waitress at the Old Hickory House and questioned the account that Beverly Young Nelson brought forth, saying she was skeptical of the account for a few reasons. She says, I never once saw Roy Moore come into the restaurant in all the time that I worked there. Well, that story itself is being challenged. I'll tell you about it after this break. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A steamed but somber mood at the moment, settling over the show, I guess, as we watch people reacting to it in our KITM hashtag column over on the TweetDeck. People are pretty stunned, I think, by the graphic nature of just how weird, sick, and depraved James O'Keefe was and has been for the last decade without our clear memory of it. And this is kind of disappointing to find out that we overlooked all this. But, the world's a crazy place, folks. And you could be forgiven for having been distracted by the fact that, I don't know, let's say the President of the United States admitted to repeated sexual assaults on tape, then admitted to the tape being real and semi-apologizing for it so that he could get elected to office, and then spending the time since being elected to office insisting that the tape that is very real and has since, by the way, been confirmed and reconfirmed by Access Hollywood as true and correct, insisting that it was, in fact, a forgery, something that apparently he started doing in private as soon as he was inaugurated, as soon as he was safely in office, or so he thought. He began denying that it was true, and he's sick in the head, and he ought to be 25th Amendmented right the hell out of there, if not impeached, not just because of the nature of the crimes he's perpetrated, but because of the mental illness that renders him unfit to recognize the truth of this situation. The mental illness which renders him unable to understand that you cannot simply big lie your way out of everything. So, before the break, though, I was telling you about the latest developments from down in Alabama. We'll read it to you this way. Roy Moore has been accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women. We know this, by the way. This is the work of it's running in an Alabama television news station's site, I guess, credited to the CNN Wire and WHNT News 19. Here's the deal. Roy Moore has been accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women. We know this, right? The accusations range from Moore asking out teenage girls when he was in his early 30s to sexual assault. The youngest accuser says she had a sexual encounter, we're still stuck with that word, with Moore in 1979 when she was 14. Another woman says he violently sexually assaulted her in 1977 when she was 16. As quickly as the accusations fly about Roy Moore, they are refuted by his campaign. I want to at least call time out just for a second to say this one. We've all been focused on the 14-year-old girl who was assaulted in 1979, and with good reason. But I just want to point out, since it has just been juxtaposed, the other woman who said she was violently sexually assaulted when she was 16, and I think that's Beverly Young Nelson, who we're talking about, who was sexually assaulted. That happened in 1977. Just in case anybody needed a reminder, and I don't think anybody listening to the show needs this reminder, one of the reasons that it's so tragic that people are intimidated about coming forward or encouraged not to come forward or quashed in any efforts or thoughts they might have about coming forward is that future victims are still vulnerable to these predators because no one will catch them and do something about it. So it's important to then remind everybody, 1977, this 16-year-old woman says, I was violently sexually assaulted by Roy Moore, and by rights, he doesn't belong on the streets. But he is on the streets, in 1979, chronologically speaking, later than 1977, to later sexually molest a 14-year-old. He should have been in jail instead, but for reasons unknown, he just wasn't. And then, of course, there was a parade of women after that, just compounding the problem. But like I said the other day, as I tweeted before the show, you have to understand it was a different time back then. Specifically, it was the time when Roy Moore was the prosecutor for the locality, Etowah County, Alabama. And gee whiz, if it wasn't, extraordinarily hard to prosecute a man for his sexual predation when he was the prosecutor. That sometimes throws a little wrench into things. Anyway, I want to tell you about this new story, and I got off into the old story. As quickly as accusations fly about Roy Moore, they are refuted by his campaign. Recently, the Moore campaign brought forward an Etowah County woman to dispute the details surrounding a sexual assault claim against Roy Moore made by Beverly Young Nelson. Rhonda Ledbetter says she worked as a waitress at the Old Hickory House and questions the account Nelson provided. Ledbetter said she is skeptical of Nelson's account for a few reasons. Quote, I never once saw Roy Moore come into the restaurant in all the time that I worked there, unquote. Ready? At a news conference addressing the allegations, legal representation for the Moore campaign also claimed that Moore had never been a patron of that restaurant. Ledbetter says she also doesn't recall working with Beverly Nelson, despite working several different shifts. I don't remember her. I never remember her working there. CNN's Gary Tuchman talked to Alabama residents who say they remember Senate candidate Roy Moore frequently visiting Old Hickory House restaurant, where Beverly Young Nelson alleges Moore assaulted her in the 1970s. Joan, whose last name was withheld out of fear of talking to the press, because why not? James O'Keefe is out there threatening to rape people on camera if they talk about Roy Moore in a certain way. Joan, whose last name was withheld out of fear of talking to the press, says she was 17 years old. Age of consent. Sorry, can't help you. 17 years old when she first met Roy Moore. And where did she meet Roy Moore? We don't know what happened. She met Roy Moore. She's not alleging anything happened, so the fact that she's 17 doesn't matter, right? Where did she meet him? That's the important question. She met him at the Old Hickory House, where Rhonda Ledbetter says he never went, and Roy's attorneys say he also never, ever. The Old Hickory House, I don't even think it existed. Why, it's a hoax. She met him at the Old Hickory House. Jones says Ledbetter's claims are false. Quote, I saw him in there 4 or 5 times a week. There's not that many times to be in a restaurant in a week, by the way. 4 or 5 is about the maximum, unless you're doing Super Size Me. He was a regular, Jones says. She doesn't know Rhonda Ledbetter or the accuser, Beverly Young Nelson, but she did see Moore several times a week when she went to pick up her sister, who worked at the restaurant. God, get her out of there. A second woman also came forward who refused to have her face shown for fear of being shunned by the public. She was a waitress at, you'll never guess. Yeah, you did guess. Good for you. The Old Hickory House for several years. She also confirmed that Roy Moore was a regular customer of the restaurant, and she saw him at least 3 times a week. Why? Because there's girls working there as waitresses. Now, why is that the case? I don't know. Who owned the Old Hickory House at the time? Maybe they were something of a perv. I don't really have any idea. But it worked to get Roy Moore's raggedy ass in there 3 to 5 times a week. So, if it works, it works. Who knew that the Old Hickory House was the underage Hooters of its day? When Roy Moore's campaign implied he had never been at the restaurant, this second woman who came forward became angry and decided to come forward. Both women say they can't be positive that the sexual allegations about Roy Moore are true, but both are troubled as to how his campaign handled the allegations. In other words, they're both angry and insulted that he's standing out there saying, I don't even know what Old Hickory House, I never been there in my entire life. And this other woman, Rhonda Ledbetter, calling out Beverly Young Nelson by name and saying, you never worked there. You don't know what you're talking about. Roy Moore was never there. How do you witness that? I mean, there's no chance. Well, you can certainly get a witness and say, I don't recall that gentleman ever being at the restaurant. I worked there for a long time. At that point, of course, you say, well, you might have other motivations, but since we're speaking of how long it's been, right? Now, you're a woman who insists that there was nothing unusual about Roy Moore, period, and there's no reason to believe him of sexual predation. So, is it really that surprising that 40 years later you don't remember that guy about whom you remember nothing of interest or nothing in particular coming into that restaurant? That doesn't surprise me. But of course, how you could testify that he never was there, I have no idea. Of course, the way you testify that he was never there is you do it outside of court and you just blatantly lie about it. And then when you get in court, you could probably repeat the lie and you won't be found guilty of perjury. It's just that your testimony will be, canned as fast as you can give it. Any decent lawyer would be able to do that. You're telling me you never saw him there, but does that mean he was never there or just you never saw him there? Well, I never saw him there. Now, okay, granted, you say you never saw him there. It's been 40 years. Is there a reason why Roy Moore would stand out in your memory at all? I just did it. You heard me do it. I don't need to repeat this. Let's move on to something else. If there is anything else out there, and there is, but I feel like we needed to give an awful lot of time to what happened yesterday. I don't know how much time, if any, I need to give to the latest Pocahontas outrage, so we'll leave that one for the time being. And wow, I don't know what else to do. We could continue with the theme here, by the way. We certainly have more writing on the subject. William Salatan putting this one together for Slate on Roy Moore. No more pretense. Republicans offer a sham defense of Roy Moore. Will this shed any light on the story, or maybe not? But you know what? I'm going to just put that one out there, and I'm going to read through it. I'll just say it outlines it makes a compilation of the accusations in bullet points and short paragraphs and then, numbered points that I think will help you encapsulate the totality of circumstances about Moore in a way that perhaps few other pieces do. So I'll recommend it to you and include it in the roundup and let you take a closer look at it when you get a chance. Let's see. Other things that I've wanted to bring up. Oh, yes. Of course, we didn't discuss yesterday, though again, it was surely something you were aware of. Trump's tantrum over Time magazine. And of course, his ludicrous claim that Time called to say I was going to probably be the person of the year again because I'm so awesome. But I told them never mind because probably is not good enough. And of course, the ludicrous notion that, in order to be Times Person of the Year would require a lengthy photo shoot, or as he said, a major photo shoot, because everything is major. I'm going to make a major announcement from the toilet today. A major photo shoot and a lengthy interview. And he doesn't like interviews or lengthy photo shoots. Not Donald Trump. Oh, come on, please. Really? All right. So he wanted to beg off from that and probably isn't good enough. I want to guarantee that I'm going to be Person of the Year. Blah, 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 exposing the incredible narcissism, etc. Good opportunity to remind everybody that Trump got punked himself with fake Time Man of the Year magazine covers in the past, and he's so dumb that he was punked into hanging them up for years at his golf clubs, even though everybody knows he did not win Man of the Year that year, but at least this time he would have a much more legitimate shot. Why he would believe that he was Man of the Year at that point, I have no idea. That's just crazy. For a sitting president of the United States, legally or otherwise, to believe that he might be named man or person, as they say, of the year. Now, well, okay, that's actually much more reasonable. But anyway, Time magazine itself, of course, came back and said, yeah, that's not actually true. We didn't call the president and tell him that. And that's not the way we do this person of the year thing. I just thought it was interesting that they pushed back. And then Josh Billinson, editor at, let's open up his profile here. Editor at the IJR's The Response, very interesting, had this interesting tweet. He was watching Fox and Friends for some ridiculous reason yesterday and had this screen cap, including this Chiron message. There's, I recognize, I don't know who's on Fox and Friends, but also they got Geraldo Rivera on there for whatever reason, remotely, and he's blabbing in this shot. And the Chiron says, Time Mag takes aim at president. I thought that was rather interesting, right? This Chiron is not even remotely grounded in reality, Josh writes, and perfectly feeds into Donald Trump's constant imagined sense of victimhood. Who else have we been discussing today that has a constant imagined sense of victimhood? Would it be, I don't know, widely known and widely reviled sexual predator James O'Keefe III by any chance? She's after me. She's trying to seduce me to get the hot story of young conservative activists. Yeah, the hot story that everybody's willing to get raped for. Sure, of course, that's exactly what she was trying to do. Trump's constant imagined sense of victimhood. Time magazine takes aim at president. By the way, others pointed this out, and Greg Sargent, I thought, had a good comment on this too. But essentially what's happening here is Trump blows it out his ass on Person of the Year. Time magazine, that's their franchise, says, that actually didn't happen. And that's not the way it would happen if we were considering making you Person of the Year anyway. So no. Fox and Friends, why? What interest might they have in offering up this angle in the story at all? Their view of it is Time magazine takes aim at the president. Not president lied out his ass about this or that, according to Time magazine, which, I mean, doesn't that have to be considered the ultimate source on whether or not Time magazine either called the president or is really considering making him Person of the Year? I think Time magazine has to be the final word on that. Now, it could still turn out that they were making him Person of the Year. We got to acknowledge that possibility. I mean, he's a freaking lunatic embarrassment sitting in the White House. I don't know how you don't make him Person of the Year, honestly, but for all the wrong reasons. But he doesn't understand that there's bad reasons for being Person of the Year, like Hitler. But okay, so he's never going to understand that. But imagine the take on this. I'm going to be Person of the Year, and they called me, but I said no way, and I turned them down first. Time magazine said, you know what? That didn't happen. Time magazine takes aim at president. Time magazine corrected an error that involved them and their key signature franchise publication of the year. This is not actually true. Takes aim at president. I thought that was a worthy observation, and I wanted to add it to the mix, despite all the other things that I'm missing today. And by the way, let me just take this moment where we still have lots of time in the show to say that Justice is doing a fantastic job in capturing those stories that you would think this show would be spending time on, but which instead, because we obsess the way we do, I obsess the way I do about stories like the James O'Keefe story, which I think should be a top billing everywhere, but obviously isn't going to be. If you're worried about missing the news by following along with my obsessions because you find them interesting or intriguing in some way, and I thank you if you do, but you still want to know what the hell else is going on today, reading through the preview of what Justice had yesterday coming up on his new show, which now follows my show in the place of the after show, was embarrassing. I'm reading it and saying, oh my God, I didn't do that. Oh my gosh, I didn't do, oh, thank God Justice is on the air to cover all these stories for Netroots Radio in the morning, because you would think nothing else was going on but me visiting a shrink every morning, if that was all you listened to. And I bet you that if you're dying for the other news tidbits today, you'll find them on Justice's show afterward as well. And I'm positive that that's the case. And we'll tell you exactly what they are. And I'll try and leave more time to get through the whole read next time and fill you in on those things. Other things that are happening that we will get to later in the week. Yes, there's plenty of those. There's lots more that we won't. Let's see. Other crazy ass things that need to be discussed. Why don't we spend a few minutes on one more take on the tax plan, which is being changed as we speak. I read yesterday that Trump was seeking yet more changes and that essentially he was seeking to make the bill even yet more egregious for the rest of us and more beneficial to him personally. And that it was likely that we would never find out what those changes are until the damn thing gets to the floor. Regular order? F you, right? By the way, one of the key observations made this morning by Greg Dworkin, who was not with us this morning, he sent me a link to his tweet, and he's absolutely right. Somebody out there for an entirely different and non-political reason asking a very popular meme question, without revealing your age, tell me something you remember that younger people today would not have any idea what you were talking about. And he stole my line. Regular order was the one. You could say conference committees as a subset of regular order, but regular order pretty much summed it up. Very true. For those of you who are political junkies, you get the joke. By the way, this piece I've pulled up here is from Vanity Fair, and that reminds me of another fantastic observation made this morning, which I should scroll back to if I can find it. But our own, I like to say he's our own because he's affiliated with Daily Kos. But our own famed editor of our cartoons vertical, whom we all know through his pen name Tom Tomorrow, tweeted out this morning just really an uncanny observation, I thought, which was, so I take it there's a news story out or about to come out saying that Melania hates her life and didn't expect him to win. Why does he say that? He says it because Donald J. Trump, Doter J. Trump, as we like to call him, had just tweeted, Melania, our great and very hard-working First Lady, who truly loves what she is doing, always thought that if you run, you will win, meaning me, of course. She would tell everyone that no doubt he will win. I also felt I would win, or I would not have run, and country is doing great, which is, of course, not insecure at all. And most people spend their mornings tweeting, my wife, who some people say actually hates me, totally loves me, and thinks I'm awesome. Well, that's probably what most people think your wife thinks about you. Well, maybe not you, per se. But, well, it turns out Tom was entirely correct. I take it there's a news story out saying that Melania hates her life and didn't expect him to win. Yes, right on the money. Of course, Vanity Fair reporting in a story released yesterday and entitled, She Didn't Want This Come Hell or High Water Inside Melania Trump's Secretive East Wing. I think I mentioned the story yesterday, so maybe you were up to speed on it when you saw that tweet this morning. But it really is uncanny that without knowing that story came out, Tom Tomorrow reads that tweet and immediately says, I know exactly what's going on. Well, that's elsewhere in Vanity Fair. What I was going to turn to in Vanity Fair was William D. Cohen's piece on the tax bill entitled, It's a Ponzi Scheme. Wall Street fears Trump's deranged tax plan. Wall Street fears it could kick off economic euthanasia. That sounds pretty damn good, right? And this is from November 17th, before the bill got worse in the Senate. Wall Street vets say an attack on blue states could start a chain reaction in the housing market. Will this be the first tax cut in American history that actually results in a recession? Would you like that? It would be horrible, of course, because it would affect all of us, and Donald Trump would never acknowledge it. He's never going to learn a lesson from causing a recession. He'll simply deny that there is a recession. It's a Ponzi scheme, a Wall Street executive told me, dismissing the idea that a multi-trillion-dollar tax cut for multinational corporations could trickle down through the economy and also pay for itself. It's a view that's widely shared among the bankers, hedge fund managers, traders, and quants whose job it is to determine with Vulcan accuracy how the Republican tax bill that passed the House yesterday will actually affect the markets. It's also more than a little ironic, given that the plan was spearheaded by two former senior partners of Goldman Sachs turned Trump shills, Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin. A pedigree that has done little to reassure Wall Street veterans who worry that the White House may accidentally nuke the economy in the name of tax reform. Will this be the first tax cut in American history that actually results in a recession? The executive asked. It's a great question, and the House plan provides plenty to be worried about in that regard. Take, for instance, the proposed elimination of the deductibility of state and local taxes. That's obviously a cynical, politically motivated ploy on Donald Trump's part to penalize voters who didn't vote for him, for good reason, in high-tax blue states such as New York and California, and to give a benefit to the red state voters who did vote for him. I get it, elections have consequences. Eliminating the deductibility of state and local taxes is an incredibly divisive plan. It's a transfer to red state wealthy guys, said the executive, who lives in a blue state. Worse, he says it could lead to another housing crisis, just as the last one is, or should be, still fresh in our collective memories. Here's his thinking, which is hard to refute. Since, generally speaking, one of the largest state taxes is on property, your home, eliminating the federal tax deduction for state property taxes will inevitably cause the cost of home ownership in states with high property taxes to go up. It follows logically that if the annual cost of home ownership goes up, then the value of the home, which is for most people their single most important, most valuable asset, must go down. The National Association of Realtors commissioned a recent study that predicted that the elimination of the deduction for state and local taxes could result in a decrease in home valuations of between 10 and 17%. That would wipe out a huge amount of homeowner equity with the usual expected consequences. The sick feeling that comes from knowing that suddenly you're poorer, which can then lead to lower consumer spending, kicking off a recession. Furthermore, if the value of homes goes down, then whatever equity has been built up in those homes will also go down, and the ability to unlock that equity through home equity loans or reverse mortgages will also decrease. Lower home values could also lead to problems, again, for government-sponsored entities like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that have guaranteed some home mortgages, which are secured by homes worth materially less. New problems for the GSEs will make it harder for people to get mortgages, leading to a lower level of home ownership than already exists. Once upon a time, owning a home was the chief pillar of the American dream. Home ownership rates reached a 50-year low in 2016. It has proved historically to be a typical American family's greatest chance for wealth creation. Poof goes the American dream once again. There's more, of course, but we won't have time to go into all of it. I recommend that you spend some time on your own leafing through it. I'll provide you a link to the article, but it's a good point and a good guess. I actually had a little bit of a nightmare moment last night as I was sitting and thinking about the end of the year coming up and the necessity for planning for pre-tax medical plans that my wife has, and realizing, wow, do I even want to do any of this if the tax law changes so dramatically next year? Will it make any sense to save pre-tax dollars for medical expenses if, one, those expenses are no longer deductible anyway, or two, the standard deduction consumes all of it anyway, or I should say subsumes all of it anyway. We will see. We'll live through this nightmare together. Anyway, it is time to hand things over to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, now open with your host, Justice. And what's up for today? Let's just get right to that. A federal judge ordered U.S. immigration officials to delay deporting 51 Indonesians living in New Hampshire under a 2010 agreement. The Mayo Clinic rips Trump for making it harder to hire world-class doctors. And Trump's cabinet Bible study leader, did you realize he had one, has a new plan to aggressively expand the Christianizing of government officials. After the break today, they move to from the front cafe to the chef's table for a discussion on the senior State Department official charged with overseeing Secretary of State Rex Everything Tillerson's effort to overhaul the agency.
On netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yeah, what about that new senior State Department official charged with overhauling the agency for Rex Tillerson? Oh, they've resigned after only 3 months on the job. And by the way, who are the Sufis and why does the Islamic State fear them so much? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. Bon appetit. We'll see you tomorrow.